On this short video, I want to ask some riddles and questions on the weekly reading, Vayigash. And on YouTube, when you place a new video, they ask if it's for kids or not. And I was wondering when I made the previous video on this topic with a question that could be used for kids, for instance, Shabbos table would be a nice time to ask these types of questions, and they could certainly be used for kids. So it's the first time I actually marked the video that it's for kids also, but I meant for kids and for adults. It could be done, of course, as an interesting discussion. Many of the questions here are require erudition, but they also could become much deeper questions. And it's really important, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, that people who have what they call Bekiyus in Ashkenazi translation, Bekiyut, the knowledge of Tanach. The Gra used to emphasize it, that kids should be taught Tanach, especially, of course, the Chumash, in a way that they almost know it by heart. Even in Gemara learning, there are two ways of learning, and usually in yeshivas they emphasize both, what they call Bekiyus and deep learning, in depth. So in depth they study maybe a couple of pages in a week or even maybe longer, but Bekiyus requires a study of at least at the speed of Daf Yomi or faster. And that makes a person baki, erudite enough to just know the general topics. Because if a person only learns deeply, he will generally not know enough on the general subject to be able to even understand what the question of the Rishonim is, why they're asking this question. You have to have the general knowledge. As the Gemara concludes, everybody needs the one that they call Sinai, meaning a person who knows a lot. Knowledge comes first, and then only the pilpul and understanding of deeper concepts and learning one from another and comparing different parts of information. So too, and even to a large extent, it's true about the written Torah. The written Torah has to be very well in one's memory all the time. And if a person is not baki and from early childhood has not learned to almost memorize by heart and know different things, then that creates a great difficulty in learning in depth. So I'm giving just a few examples of various questions that one can ask. Of course, parents can come up with all kinds of questions on the Parsha. Just open any paragraph and see what questions can be asked about it. And even if it's just a straightforward question, something like, how old was Yosef when he met his father? Well, it says how old he was. He was 39, because, of course, 7 years of plenty passed, and then 2 years of hunger, and that's when he met his father. He was 30 when Pharaoh had his famous dream, and then after 9 more years, Yosef met his father. A somewhat more complex question is, how long was Yosef absent since the time that he was sold to slavery? For that, you have to remember what it said in Parshas Vayigash in the beginning, that he was 17. So 39 minus 17 is 22. Of course, Chazal talk about it, that it's 22 years that Yosef did not see his father. And they even say that it was midah keneged midah, the 22 years that Yakov was away without seeing Yitzchak. Even though it's more complex than that, I simplified a little bit the Midrash of Chazal. They say that Yakov actually didn't see Yitzchak for a longer period of time, but some of the time, according to Chazal, he was studying the Torah before it was given, if you could call it, the proto-Torah in the Academy of Shev and Ever, and that's why those years do not count as a kind of, he had a good excuse, he was learning Torah, but the rest of the 22 years he was in Lavan's house, that's the years he did not have a chance to help his elderly father, and that's why he was deprived of seeing Yosef for the same number of years. Anyway, so these are more straightforward questions, but there are some questions that are not as easy, but still quite possible that kids, especially older kids, teenagers, could answer them if they think about it, or if we ask them additional questions on the way. So here are some examples. what is the order in which the children of Yaakov are described here? And there are different orders when in different places where all the children of Yaakov are described. In different places, the order is different. Here, the order is obviously according to first the first wife of Yaakov, Leah, and then her maidservant, Zilpah. So it's the children of Leah and Zilpah first, and then the children of Rachel and children of her maidservant, Bilhah. Interestingly, the Gra points out that the children and grandchildren of each of our mothers, Leah and Rachel, were twice as many as their maidservants. I mean, with Leah it's a little bit more complex because it says the number 33. That's the well-known 33rd person that we don't know who it was. Some say it was Yocheved that is counted as the 33rd person, but really the number that actually is mentioned by name is 32. But the 33rd person is the one that makes up for the 70th person of the entire family of Yaakov. Some say it's actually Osnat that should be counted as 33rd. But most of Chazal and Rashi bring that it was Yocheved that was born as they entered Egypt. But anyway, if we only count those who are mentioned, then there's 32, and then her maidservant Zilpah had 16 descendants. And then Rachel had 14, and Bilhah 7. And which of the sons of Yaakov had the most children? This is also a straightforward question, actually. You could just count. It turns out to be Binyamin. Although with Binyamin it's a little bit more complex. It turns out that some say that Binyamin had children and grandchildren that are counted here. It has to do with the other places where the descendants of Binyamin are mentioned. There's, for instance, discussion based on Divrei Hayamim and based on the book of Bamidbar in Parshat Pinchas. So with Binyamin it's pretty complex, but at any rate he probably had the most sons of all the children of Yaakov. Chazal say he was naming everybody to remind him of Yosef, who he loved the most, his brother, his only brother from the mother's side. One possible recommended reading that, again, the parent might want to read it, this part to the kid, is Malbim to Divrei Hayamim, 8th chapter, 3rd verse. Also Ramban on the book of Bamidbar, the Parshas Pinchas, 26th chapter, 13th verse, discusses some of this. And who of the children of Yaakov had the least number of children? Of course, it's Dan. It says Bnei Dan Hushim. Even though Bnei is a plural, some of Chazal say that this is just normal, that the plural is used for singular in the Torah, and give other examples of this. But what's interesting is others in Midrash Rabbah, for instance, bring that maybe Dan had 2 children. Now Yakov Kamenetsky explains that he possibly had 2 children named the same way, Hush, Hushim. The children of Dan, Hushim, elder Hush and younger Hush. But apparently one of them died, as Ibn Ezra says, and that's why only one is counted. Although there are possibilities that he is actually the 70th soul that I was discussing before, the 70th missing soul. I'm not going to go into this, but again, at the Shabbos table, if there is more room, more time, people can discuss the issue of children of Dan as well. Now, with children of Shimon, there could be a lot of discussion. First of all, here, one of his sons is called Yimuel. So you may want to ask, how is he called in a different place? Turns out that in other places, he's sometimes called Nimuel. This is not uncommon when people had 2 names. In this case, it's similar names. But there was another Nimuel, which even adds to additional confusion. If you remember, Datan and Aviram were sons of Eliav. So another brother of theirs is actually named Nimuel. So besides Datan and Aviram, who of course were very bad people and ended up very, very badly in the book of Bamidbar, there was a brother of theirs that doesn't say anything bad about him, and his name was also Nimuel. So one of the great-grandchildren of Reuben was named Nimuel. And a number of other children of Shimon are also named differently. Sometimes it's not even a similar sounding name, but similar meaning name. For example, Tzohar is in our Parsha, is the same person as Zerach in Parshat Pinchas. Zerach and Tzohar seem to mean the same thing, but sound, of course, differently. Some kind of shining. And in Divrei Hayamim, he is also mentioned as Zerach. Also, there are possibilities that maybe Yachin is the same person as Yariv in Divrei Hayamim. That's what Malbim considers. The truth is, there are all kinds of questions about the specific descendants mentioned in Parshat Pinchas, and some possibilities that families changed. For instance, if one of the grandchildren of Yakov didn't have descendants, so there was no family in the times of Pinchas with that name. But some families may have split, some families may have joined others, so that's why there are a lot of different possibilities, and definitely the list of descendants of Yakov that formed their families, as mentioned in Parshat Pinchas, is not always the same as what is mentioned in our Parsha. One of the places to look to find different opinions on those types of subjects would be Living Torah by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. In his notes, he usually brings these types of answers from various Rishonim, sometimes from Chazal, to these types of differences between genealogies here and the genealogies in Parshat Pinchas and the Divrei Hayamim. Where did Yaakov's last prophetic revelation, at least the last mentioned in the Torah, occur? So this question is relatively straightforward. Our Parshat Vayigash, is the last time that it mentions Hashem came to Yakov, and it says that when Yakov was descending to Egypt in Beersheba. This was the last revelation. After that, maybe Yakov had revelations, but at least the Torah doesn't say anything about it in the entire time Yakov was in Egypt until his death. It doesn't say openly that Hashem came to him. So we know the first king of Israel was called Shaul. And which Shaul is mentioned in our Parsha, and what other person named Shaul was already mentioned in the Torah? So the answer is one of the sons of Shimon is named Shaul. Now I saw an interesting explanation, I think in Tiferet Israel and Mishnayot, that Shaul, that is the name of the king of the first king of Israel, his name somewhat hints to the idea that they asked. Lishol means to ask. They asked for the first king. Right? They asked too early. Shmuel was very angry with them. Why they asked the king and didn't want to continue the way it was until now, with different judges being the leaders of the people. So it's interesting that if, according to this, I wonder about the other Shauls mentioned. So there is already one Shaul that was mentioned as a non-Jewish king, and king of Edom, actually, in the list of Edomian kings at the end of Parshat Vayishlach, the kings that ruled over the descendants of Esau. So one of them was named Shaul. So these are the types of questions. These are just a handful of examples of the types of questions that one can ask, riddles, something to discuss with the children during the meal on Shabbat. And I hope this will be useful. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.